even if there's an assault on institutions and democracy and freedom, one thing remains true, and it's important to kind of keep this front of mind. Public opinion still matters, citizen action still matters, and elections still matter in this country. And we've seen it, right, all year. We saw it back in April in Wisconsin, where Elon Musk dumped millions of dollars to back the conservative Supreme Court candidate endorsed by Donald Trump, and he lost. People did not like Elon's meddling in that election. This week, the Democratic-led court in Wisconsin struck down a 19th century abortion ban. Again, elections still matter a huge amount. We saw it in a New York mayoral primary, where Democratic Socialist Zohran Mamdani won that Democratic primary by a lot in a sort of shocking upset because voters were tired of the status quo. The millions of dollars of negative ads run against him didn't matter. And so today is the official start of the 2026 midterms. And this badge of shame, this bill, hangs on Republicans. We know public opinion still matters. The question is, what happens now? Jon Tester served as a Democratic senator from Montana for 18 years and knows a thing or two about elections, and he joins me now. You know, we talked about this the last time, John, and it was just striking to me that throughout the entire process, even the most conservative members of the Democratic Party, Jared Golden, who represents a district Trump won up in Maine, Marie Gluesenkamp-Perez, who represents a district Trump has carried in Washington state, had no temptation to vote for this bill. This was an easy one for all Democrats. What do you make of that?
Well, I think it just shows how fundamentally flawed, what a bad bill it really is. I think when you take a look at what some of the folks in Congress did, most of the times when you get a bill like this, you want to add things to increase funding for your district or for your state. What we saw the folks in Congress doing is trying to stop things that were going to happen to their state in this bill. So trying to get exemptions or trying to get things taken out. Alaska was a prime example. But this was a really bad bill, a poorly thought out bill that really, in the end, not only has real negative impacts on hospitals throughout the country, and especially rural America, on food security, has some impacts on climate change. There's no doubt about that, and increases the national debt. So there's a lot of reasons why this bill doesn't pass the smell test. And the gentleman who was on before me, exactly correct. They're going to go out and they're going to talk about the impacts that this bill has on regular people. And I think it's not going to be something that Republicans are going to be able to defend very easily. I will say that, because hospitals, prime example, in rural America, for sure, these rural hospitals are hanging on by their fingernails. And we're going to see some of those hospitals close. And I think at a much higher rate than they would otherwise if this bill would not have passed.
There's also, in a political sense, I mean, there's a few things here, right? You've got what, we call thermostatic public opinion, right? The public tends to move against the party in power when it has unified governance. That's why we tend to see, those midterms go better for the out party. You've got the fact that people are really unhappy with the state of the economy, but also politically, this seems to me that both the particulars of the bill are unpopular, but also it means a kind of ownership over everything bad that happens in a political sense for folks like, the Texas Senator John Cornyn, if he survives his primary, or Joni Ernst, or Susan Collins, who voted against the bill. You still have, as a candidate, you're still going to have that baggage.
No doubt about it. You're not going to be able to get away from it. And look, Susan, I think, voted against the bill. She may be able to say, I didn't like the bill and I voted against it. But the fact of the matter is this is a Republican drafted bill that meets the needs of that Project 2025 that was talked about a lot last election. And it's given donors to Republican campaigns a big windfall, and it increases the national debt while hammering food security and hammering healthcare throughout the country. So it's going to be really tough to stand up with a straight face and say, I voted for this bill because it was the right thing to do for this country. Absolutely wrong. And I think that's why you saw so many meetings at the White House. I think that's why you saw so many conversations on the floor. I think that's why you saw some Republicans that really were able to step up and say, no, this is no good. This bill doesn't work for a number of reasons, and there were plenty. and you know, those folks, most of them aren't going to run again, but you know, that's probably unfortunate. But in the end, this bill was just a bad bill, just a bad piece of legislation.
You won 3 terms in a state that hasn't gone at the presidential level for a Democrat in decades, and there's a cluster of you and Sherrod Brown and Claire McCaskill before she lost, and a whole line of others. And the structural polarization in the country has meant more and more states have been tougher and tougher climbs for Democrats. My big question to you is, given everything we're seeing, do you think Democrats can field and win competitive candidates and races in states like Texas and Iowa and North Carolina and Maine?
I absolutely do, and I think they have to be more than just against this bill. I think this bill puts the ball on the tee, so to speak, and it's something that they can whack every day. But they also have to have something they stand for, whether that's in areas of housing or education or whatever it might be. But so there it has to be a two-pronged approach for sure. You know, making them aware of this bill's number one, and then making sure that the people out there across this country, rural America, urban America, everywhere, understands what Democrats stand for. And they've got some work to do on that. Because quite frankly, if the last election showed us anything, the message just wasn't there. And so they need to do some work on the message.